People like to say that tragedy always comes suddenly, like lightning striking straight into the heart, and you find yourself in the eye of the storm before you can even breathe. But if I'm honest with myself, everything in my life has unfolded slowly and painfully, like water that seeps through tiny cracks in the wall for years, rots there, destroys the foundation, and you, busy with everyday life, do not notice it until the smell of dampness becomes unbearable. My name is Elena. I am 34 years old. I am a music teacher, and behind me are years filled with the sounds of the piano, the voices of students and endless scales that sometimes made my head spin, but at the same time, they gave me the feeling that I am needed, that I matter. I am the mother of a 15-year-old daughter named Leah, an amazing girl, with her vulnerable heart, deep mind, and maturity that often made me feel like a student next to my own child. And until recently, I was married to Matteo, a man I had known my entire life since we were in high school together. He was my first love, my first kiss, and it all happened in a small music room that smelled of polished wood and chalk, and where I first learned what someone else's breath sounded like close to my own. We were kids, but at that moment, it felt like the world belonged to just the two of us. A week after graduation, I found out I was expecting a baby, and we had no doubts. We accepted it as a natural twist of fate. We got married, moved into a modest apartment near my parents, and began to build a life that we called ours. For years, I honestly thought we were happy, or at least I thought we were. The three of us would sit around an old wooden table, passing a bowl of mashed potatoes around and laughing until we cried at some ridiculous story Leah brought home from school. We never had extra money, but we had a sense of home, a familiar rhythm, cozy evenings, and those messages from Matteo in the middle of the day. I miss you. I kept them as little proof that everything was right with us. But happiness does not always die with a bang. More often, it dissolves quietly, like smoke, and you notice its absence only when it is too late. When Leah turned 10, everything began to change. At first, he said that he stayed late at work once a week, then twice. Then it became the norm. He explained that there were corporate dinners, meetings with colleagues, business cocktails, and on weekends, golf, some seminars. He still came home, still kissed me on the cheek, but there was emptiness in his eyes, and this emptiness became more terrible than any arguments. I tried to tell myself he was just tired, that he was feeling the pinch, that the economy was collapsing and all men his age felt trapped. But when I asked him directly, "Who are you dating?" he'd grin, "Nobody, that's silly." And that only made it worse because I felt like he wasn't telling the whole truth. Over time, even his texts became short, cold lines. "Eat without me." "Don't wait up," I stopped setting the table for 3, and one day I noticed Leah silently clearing his plate and throwing its contents in the trash. My daughter and I created our own little world, our own little island. We had movie nights cooked together, laughing over recipes that had gone wrong, played piano together. It wasn't perfect, but it was alive. And yet I missed him, even when I hated myself for missing him. I've taught music all my life. Since I was 16, I taught children how to hold their hands correctly on the keys. And I always dreamed of having a studio, a small room in my future house, where there would be a grand piano, where the walls would be soft blue, and where the shelves would be filled with books and metronomes. I even once chose paint samples, but all of this remained just a dream, dust on the shelf of my mind, because we were still living in a rented apartment. One Saturday, when Leah stayed the night at a friend's house and Matteo was unexpectedly home, I decided to try to talk. The silence in the apartment seemed unusual, as if the space itself was waiting for something important. He was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at his phone. I put a cup of coffee in front of him, and he didn't even look up. "Hey," I said quietly, "I was thinking, maybe we should think about buying a house?" He blinked and asked without even looking up, "What should we buy?" "A house. It may be small, but our own. Leah is growing up, and I really want to set up a studio." And then he laughed, not softly, but harshly, almost mockingly. Elena, I'm 36 years old. If we take out a mortgage now, we'll be paying until retirement, if we even live that long. We've missed our chance, you know? You buy things like this when the kids are little and now it's too late. His words hit me so hard that a lump formed in my throat. I whispered, "This isn't about pictures in magazines. This is about security, about home, about our independence. You always said yourself that you hate paying rent." He stood up abruptly, grabbed the keys, and said, "We can't afford it." End of story. And he left, without a kiss, without a goodbye. The coffee was left to cool on the table. That night, I stood by the kitchen window, looking out at the rain, heavy and endless. Leah was still at her friend's, and Mateo wasn't answering my calls or texts. By 10:30, I had checked my phone dozens of times. By 11, I was pacing the room, restless, and for the first time in years, I felt like my life was falling apart right before my eyes. And then I did something that still seems unreal to me, as if it wasn't me who was in control of my actions, but some other desperate woman in my body. I grabbed my keys and went out into the rain, slippery and smelling of wet asphalt, and a few minutes later I was already sitting behind the wheel of a car without the slightest plan, but as if pushed by an inner impulse that was impossible to stop. He didn't call, didn't write, didn't ask me to come get him. I didn't even know for sure where he might be, but a random detail popped into my memory. A few days ago, Mateo mentioned that he would have to take the commuter train because a meeting with colleagues would drag on in the center. I clung to that memory as if it were the last thread leading to him, and although I knew in my mind how stupid and reckless it was, my heart was beating so hard that any arguments lost their meaning. I missed us. Those evenings when we just sat on the couch, our shoulders pressed together, and the world seemed safe. And maybe I hoped that if he saw me there, among the raindrops and the lights of the station, something in him would tremble, that we would drive home in silence, but not in icy resentment, but in a silence from which a conversation could be born. Maybe he would tell me the truth, admit where his heart had gone, and at least I would stop guessing and tormenting myself. I parked the car a block away from the platform. The rain turned everything around into watercolors, smearing the outlines of the streetlights and the faces of passers-by, and I leaned back in the seat, looking through the wet glass at the glowing arrivals board. When the train arrived, the platform became lively. People were hurrying, covering themselves with umbrellas. Some were laughing, some were in a hurry, and suddenly I saw him. Mateo. He got off in his gray coat, the same one he wore to work, and he looked calm, relaxed, like a man who had no secrets, no heaviness in his soul. But he was not alone. Next to him was a woman with a bright red umbrella in her hands, in a light brown coat, neat low-heeled shoes, with soft lipstick on her lips, and next to her was a boy of about 5 or 6, with a bright yellow backpack with a shark drawn on it. I froze. The woman said something, and Mateo laughed as I had not heard him laugh for a long time, and then he kissed her. Not in a friendly way, not on the cheek, but the way you kiss a woman with whom you live one life. And the boy reached out to him, grabbed his palm, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, as if he were holding his father's hand. I couldn't move. Everything inside me froze, my breath disappeared, and my head started buzzing, as if a huge shell had been pressed to my ear and absorbed all sounds. I didn't notice the red light, didn't notice the truck rushing to the left. I only remember how the world suddenly exploded. A blow, the crunch of glass, metal, and the sickening crack of my own bones. And then, nothing. Blackness. Falling into the deepest abyss of the ocean where there is no light, no air. The first thing I felt then was the cold, icy, unbearable, penetrating to the heart. The second was absence. I tried to move my legs, and only one responded. Panic squeezed my chest like a tight rope. I jerked the blanket away and screamed because my left leg was missing below the knee. Just smooth gauze and emptiness. No warning, no attempt to hide the horror with bandages. A nurse came running at the scream, followed by Leah. She was crying but tried to wipe away her tears so that I wouldn't notice. "You're not sleeping," she whispered and carefully brushed the hair from my forehead. "Thank God." "What happened?" My voice was hoarse, breaking like a dry branch. Leah sobbed, "An accident. A truck at the station." And she added quickly, as if she was afraid she wouldn't be able to bear it, You're alive, Mom. I'll call a doctor now, and I'll call Dad too." She ran out before I could say anything. Time lost its shape after that. The doctors spoke to me softly, assured me that it was a miracle that I had survived, told me about the nerve injury, about new opportunities, about prosthetics, and I nodded, but I didn't hear them. All I saw before my eyes was that boy's hand intertwined with Mateo's and their light, natural kiss. 3 days later, I was discharged and brought back to the apartment. Everything that I had previously done automatically suddenly became a test. Cooking, getting to the bathroom, moving from room to room. The narrow kitchen was stifling. The bathroom turned into a trap. The stroller scraped against the walls, got stuck in doorways and carpets, and my knuckles ached from the constant blows. At first, Mateo pretended to try. He came home early, cooked simple dinners, offered to help me with my clothes a couple of times. But it was all like he was checking off a checklist so no one could accuse him of inaction. He wouldn't look me in the eye, wouldn't touch me. I once asked him to help me into bed, and I saw him flinch at the touch. "I'm sorry," I whispered, the humiliation burning. He replied evenly, "Don't worry about it," and left the room. Leah tried her best, bringing tea, fluffing pillows, painting my nails, making jokes, but I couldn't look her in the eye because I felt like I'd let her down, like half of me was dead and the other half didn't know how to be a mother. Sleepy during the day, insomniac at night, a heaviness in my soul. I was slowly sinking into darkness. And then one Tuesday afternoon, Mateo walked in, threw his keys on the counter, and looked at me with the look he gave a call center and said, "I think we should break up." I stared at him, dumbfounded, feeling like everything inside me was falling into the abyss, and the words that came out of his mouth hit me like stones, leaving dents and cracks. "Are you serious?" My voice broke, but he answered without blinking. "I can't do this, Elena. You've changed. It's all too hard. The constant emotions, your helplessness. I didn't sign up to be a caregiver." The words burned right through me, and I said quietly, my breath breaking, "I didn't sign up to lose my leg, Mateo." He shrugged with such cold indifference that it took my breath away. "I just don't see the point in dragging it out." We are both unhappy. At that moment, I should have screamed, thrown everything I could get my hands on at him, demanded an explanation, pulled out a confession, but instead, I heard my own voice, quiet and calm. "Okay?" He blinked, not believing that I had agreed so quickly. "Are you serious? You want a divorce? You will get it. But first, you will go with me to your parents and say this in front of them. I gave them 20 years of my life, and they deserve to hear the truth from both of us." His jaw twitched, his face cracked. He muttered, "Why?" And I answered firmly, "Because I deserve it." A moment of silence hung between us. Then he nodded briefly. "Okay, tomorrow." But I already had a plan. That night, while Leah slept behind the thin wall, I opened the closet and pulled out a box that Mateo had probably long forgotten about. Inside were old hard drives and SD cards from the dashcam of our last car, the one I insisted on buying him after we almost had an accident. When we returned it last year, he hadn't even bothered to erase the footage. My heart was pounding in my throat. My hands were shaking as I inserted the card into my laptop. And there it was, the footage of that night. Rain streaming down the windshield, the platform glowing with a blurry electric light, and I saw the red umbrella again, the woman next to it, the kiss, the boy reaching out to Mateo. I paused the frame, zoomed in. Clear, no doubt about it. This wasn't just a passing fancy, not a casual fling. This was family, a different family. I rewound the tape over and over until I felt sick to my stomach, and then the memory shot through me. That moment just before the accident, his face, his laugh, his hand intertwined with the child's. My brain had blocked the image out then, locked it in the fog of trauma, but now it surfaced, sharp as shards of glass. I spent the next hours obsessively going through his emails, old phone bills, credit card statements, every detail that might give me an answer. And when it all came together, I dialed a private investigator. By morning, I had more than just a video. I had names, addresses, the boy's birth certificate. His name was Ignacio. His mother was Ashley. She had been receiving regular transfers from Mateo's account for over a year. The two of them rented a townhouse in the neighboring suburbs. Joint utility bills, furniture orders, prepaid school fees. He hadn't just cheated. He had built a new life, with a new woman, a new child. And I had lost a leg for accidentally seeing the truth. The next day, he helped me walk to his parents' house. Giovanna answered the door, and her smile froze at the sight of me in a wheelchair. "Oh, my dear, you poor thing," she whispered as Ignacio, Mateo's father, appeared in the doorway. "We were going to visit you in the hospital." I smiled softly. "It's okay. I'm glad we could come now." We sat in the living room and Mateo was visibly nervous, shifting in his seat. I folded my hands in my lap and said calmly, "We're here because Mateo wants a divorce." Giovanna gasped. "What?" He cleared his throat and said, "Nothing special. Everything has changed. Elena has changed. I just don't think anymore." "You don't think what?" Ignacio interrupted sharply. Mateo spat. "That it's fair for both of us." "She's disabled." "Disabled," I repeated quietly, savoring the bitterness of the word. Giovanna turned pale. "Sweetheart, we didn't know." "It's okay," I interrupted. "Really." "I understand. Mateo wants to go, and I won't stop him." He sighed in relief, but I added, "Before I sign anything, there's something I want to show you." I pulled my laptop out of my bag, having prepared a short clip in advance, just 30 seconds. "Please watch carefully," I said. Giovanna and Ignacio leaned forward. Mateo frowned. The screen began to rain, a platform appeared, a woman with a red umbrella, a kiss, a boy reaching for Mateo's hand. I pressed pause. The room was dead silent. Ignacio blinked, not believing his eyes. "Mateo? It's not Leah," Giovanna whispered, covering her mouth with her hand. I turned the screen to him. "You thought I wouldn't remember. You thought the accident had wiped my memories clean. But I remember." His face went white. "You said I was being dramatic, that I was a burden. You wanted a divorce because of this." I tapped my thigh. "But the truth is, you just didn't want to get caught." Ignacio leaned back in his chair. Giovanna closed her eyes as if praying. "You were going through my things?" Mateo forced out. I smiled bitterly. "No. I was going through mine." The room was so quiet you could hear the clock ticking. The screen froze. Mateo, the woman, the child. Neither of their parents knew them. I closed the laptop slowly and said in an even voice, "His name is Ignacio. He's 6 years old. I have his birth certificate, bank transfers, the lease for the townhouse, shared utility bills, school, and under emergency contact, it says," Mateo. Giovanna gasped, as if all the air had been knocked out of her lungs, and the room momentarily filled with the sound of her short, startled intake of breath. "I hired a private investigator," I said, trying to keep my voice steady and steady. "He found everything in a few days. Mateo is living a double life." Giovanna's voice wavered, and she looked down and said, barely audibly, "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," I said. "I didn't come here for an apology. I came here for clarity." I turned to Mateo and looked him straight in the eye. "You lied to me. You abandoned your family. You made me feel like dead weight, a burden, while you raised your second child as if our daughter had never existed. And when I accidentally saw you, you let me get hit by a truck." Matteo flinched as if my words had pierced him. "You knew I saw you," I continued, not looking away. "I remember how you froze on the platform. You knew the image would come back to me, and that's why you were so insistent on a quick divorce. You thought you could get away with it," Giovanna, pale, whispered, "Is it true?" And only then did Matteo, who had been silent until then, speak. "I never wanted this to happen. It just got out of hand. He cut off someone's leg," I said, emphasizing each word. "It nearly killed me." No one moved. There was a dull heaviness in the air, as if the walls themselves had absorbed our conversation. Then I took a deep breath and said, "But I'm not here to destroy you." Every head snapped up. "I'm here for a deal." Matteo blinked, his face twitching. "Okay then." I nodded. "You want a divorce?" "Fine. I'll sign the papers today. I won't make a show of it. I won't tell Leah yet. I'm giving you a second chance at your new, shiny life." He tilted his head to the side, eyeing me suspiciously. "What's the catch?" "No catch," I answered calmly. "Just the price." Giovanna visibly tensed. "How much do you want?" I turned to her, trying to sound gentle but firm. "I don't want your money. I want independence. A home that suits me. A space where I can teach, earn money, and move around freely." "You mean a new apartment?" Giovanna asked. I shook my head. "No, a custom-built home. 1-story, wheelchair accessible, open floor plan, no stairs, wide doorways, ADA kitchen, and one large studio, soundproofed, well-lit, and with a new Yamaha grand piano." Matteo chuckled sarcastically. "It's going to cost hundreds of thousands." I turned to him and said coolly, "Then you better get to work." Giovanna glanced quickly at her son, then looked at me. "You're really going to keep quiet about this?" I nodded. "I'm not looking for revenge. I'm looking for a life." Ignazio, who had been silent until then, slowly stood up. "We'll do it," he said. Matteo choked. "Dad!" "We'll do it," Ignazio repeated firmly, "and you'll make payments until you've covered every penny." 3 months later, I moved into the foyer of my new home. It was just as I had imagined it would be during those long, sleepless nights after the disaster. Warm wood floors with no thresholds, pull-out countertops, smart lighting that you could control with your voice, grab bars in the bathroom, ramps that looked like garden paths, and most of all, light. So much light, streaming through the wide windows. In the back was the studio, my studio, a spacious, soundproofed room with sky-blue walls, adjustable benches, shelves for music, and a new Yamaha grand piano whose surface reflected the morning rays. There was a parents' corner, shelves of books and instruments, and thanks to Leah, a corkboard covered with drawings from my first students, for I now had many of them. Word of the music teacher who taught from a wheelchair and who demanded stamina spread quickly, and I became not a pitiful spectacle, but a symbol for the community. Leah thrived by my side. She helped during lessons, quietly encouraged the more timid children, brought her keyboard to the studio and rehearsed after I had finished my lessons. One evening she said, "I want to go to music school. Maybe we'll even open a second studio together." I listened and cried quietly, so she wouldn't notice, because she was too busy with her future. I saw Matteo only once after the house was finished. He came with a check, part of our deal. His face was drawn, there were shadows under his eyes. He had lost weight, as if the life itself had drained from him. "I need to give this," he said, holding the envelope as if it burned his hands. I took it silently. He added after a pause, "Leah doesn't answer my messages." I looked at him calmly. "She knows the main thing, that you were unfaithful, that you left. She doesn't want details. She just doesn't want lies." He swallowed and asked under his breath, "What about Ignazio?" I raised an eyebrow. "That's your responsibility now." I didn't slam the door or yell or ask why he never visited me in the hospital or why he thought I was too broken to stay. I didn't need that. I already had everything he threw away. 6 months later, I wrote in my journal, "Tonight, Leah and I sat on the back porch watching the sunset. She played a new tune, something slow and hopeful. There's a waiting list in my studio. The hallway is filled with children's laughter. The house smells of citrus candles and fresh notes. My leg is gone, but I'm alive. I'm still here, playing, teaching, moving forward.